I never thought I'd be sitting here telling this story, but some things need to be said out loud, even when they hurt. 2 years ago, my brother Jake emptied my bank account of $67,000, my entire life savings, money I'd worked double shifts at the hospital for, money that was supposed to be my down payment on a house. Gone. Last month, that same brother called me from the hospital. His kidneys were failing, and he needed a donor. Family members are usually the best match, and I was his last hope. In that moment, I had what most people would call leverage, the power to say no to someone who had taken everything from me, the chance to watch him experience the same desperation I felt when I discovered my account had been drained. But life isn't about evening scores. It's about something much more complicated. If you've ever had to choose between revenge and compassion, you might understand what I'm about to share. Hit subscribe and stay with me, because this story doesn't end how you might expect. Growing up in suburban Minneapolis, my family looked picture perfect from the outside. Mom worked as a high school counselor, Dad ran a moderately successful construction company, and our brick colonial on Maple Street hosted neighborhood barbecues every 4th of July. Then there was Jake, my older brother by 3 years, the golden child who could do no wrong. Captain of the hockey team, straight-A student, and the first in our family to get accepted to an Ivy League school. And me? I was just Sarah, the quiet one who worked hard but never quite measured up. Our parents didn't create this dynamic intentionally. It was subtle, the way Mom would interrupt my stories to ask Jake about his day, how Dad would beam with pride showing off Jake's trophies while my academic awards gathered dust in a drawer. At family reunions, relatives would ask Jake about his future plans while I refilled the lemonade pitchers. This wasn't unique to our family. Many Midwestern households functioned on similar unspoken hierarchies. I remember my 16th birthday party. Mom had promised it would be special, sweet 16 and all that. I'd invited my closest friends, and we planned to have dinner at Lindholm's, this local Swedish restaurant that was a big deal in our community. Jake was home from college that weekend, and suddenly my birthday dinner became about him. "Your brother is only home for 2 days," Mom explained while changing the reservation. "We should go somewhere he likes." We ended up at a sports bar where everyone watched the Vikings game while I picked at mozzarella sticks, my friends texting under the table about how boring it was. When it came time for gifts, Jake announced he'd forgotten, but promised something awesome later. That something never came. Things got worse after our parents divorced during my senior year. Dad moved to Arizona with his new girlfriend, and Mom threw herself into work. Jake had graduated by then and landed a job at a finance firm in Chicago. He'd come home for holidays, and Mom would transform, cooking his favorite meals, laughing at his jokes, hanging on every story about his glamorous city life. Meanwhile, I stayed local, attending the University of Minnesota's nursing program, living at home to save money, and becoming Mom's emotional support system when Jake wasn't around. Despite everything, I worked hard. I graduated, got a good job at Abbott Northwestern Hospital, and began saving for my own place. I lived frugally, drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic, packed lunches, picked up extra shifts. After 5 years, I had saved $67,000. In the Minneapolis housing market, that meant I could finally afford a modest starter home in a decent neighborhood. I was so proud of that money. It represented independence, proof that I could succeed on my own terms. Then came what I thought was Jake's grand gesture. He showed up at my apartment one evening, unusually subdued. He confessed that his perfect life was a facade. He'd lost his job months ago, his girlfriend had left him, and he was drowning in debt. He seemed genuinely remorseful, vulnerable in a way I'd never seen before. "I need a fresh start," he said, "but I can't do it alone." He needed money to pay off creditors and move to Seattle for a promising new position. He swore he'd pay me back with interest once he got back on his feet. What Jake didn't know was that I had already discovered his secret. A mutual friend from college had mentioned seeing Jake in Vegas, living it up at high roller tables, posting flashy photos on social media under an account name I didn't recognize. He'd been gambling heavily for years. The job loss wasn't bad luck. He'd been fired for borrowing company funds. The girlfriend hadn't simply left, she'd fled after finding out he'd taken a second mortgage on their condo without telling her. The Seattle job? It didn't exist. I kept this knowledge to myself that night, hoping, praying that for once Jake was being honest with me, that maybe this was his rock bottom, his moment of truth. So I agreed to help, giving him access to my savings account to transfer what he needed. The next morning, I woke up to a zero balance and a text that simply read, "Thank you. I'll explain everything soon." He didn't explain. He disappeared. For 2 years, I didn't hear a word from Jake. I filed a police report, but since I'd willingly given him access to my account, they classified it as a civil matter. Mom refused to believe Jake would steal from me. There must be some misunderstanding, she insisted. I started over financially, picked up night shifts, and slowly rebuilt my savings, though the thought of ever trusting anyone again felt like a distant possibility. Then came Thanksgiving 2023. Mom called, insisting I come home for dinner. "I have a surprise," she said, her voice brimming with excitement. I should have known what that meant. When I pulled into the driveway, there it was, Jake's rental car, a sleek black Audi. My stomach dropped. Walking into my childhood home felt like entering a theater where everyone had rehearsed their lines except me. Mom was buzzing around the kitchen, preparing Jake's favorite dishes, her special cranberry sauce, the cornbread stuffing he loved. Dad had even flown in from Scottsdale, something he hadn't done for any holiday since the divorce. The dining room table was set with the good china, the kind reserved for special occasions. And there was Jake, looking thinner than I remembered, sitting in Dad's old recliner like nothing had happened. When he saw me, he stood up with an awkward smile. "Hey, Sar," he said, using my childhood nickname as if we were still kids sharing a bunk bed during summer thunderstorms. I froze in the doorway, my pumpkin pie nearly slipping from my hands. Mom rushed over, taking the pie and whispering, "He's been through a lot. Just give him a chance to explain." Dad clapped me on the shoulder with a gruff, "Good to see you, kiddo." The subtext was clear. Keep the peace. Don't make a scene. This is still Jake's show. Dinner was excruciating. Jake dominated the conversation with sanitized stories about his consulting work in California, carefully avoiding any mention of the past 2 years or my money. Mom and Dad nodded encouragingly, passing him seconds before anyone else had firsts. I sat silently, pushing sweet potatoes around my plate, feeling invisible in the familiar way that had defined my childhood. "Sarah's doing great at the hospital," Mom finally said during a lull, as if remembering I existed. "She might be up for a promotion to charge nurse." "That's awesome," Jake said, turning to me with what seemed like genuine interest. "Always knew you'd be good at taking care of people." The irony wasn't lost on me. I managed a tight smile. I'm good at recognizing who deserves care. A flicker of discomfort crossed his face, but he recovered quickly. "Actually, that's kind of why I wanted everyone here today. I have something important to share." The room fell silent. Mom reached for Dad's hand, a gesture I hadn't seen in years. Jake took a deep breath. "I've been sick," he said simply. "My kidneys are failing. I've been on dialysis for months, but the doctors say I need a transplant soon. They've tested Mom and Dad, but neither is a match. He looked directly at me. You're my last hope, Sarah. The pie server clattered against my plate. The audacity was breathtaking. 2 years of silence, $67,000 stolen, and now he wanted a piece of my body too? Is this a joke? I finally managed. I wish it was, he said, his voice cracking. He pulled up his sleeve to reveal a dialysis port. I've got stage 5 renal disease. The doctors give me maybe a year without a transplant. Mom was crying now. Please, Sarah, he's your brother. Was my brother, I corrected her, before he cleaned out my bank account and disappeared for 2 years. Dad cleared his throat uncomfortably. Jake told us about that. He made a mistake. He was in trouble. And I wasn't, I interrupted, my voice rising. I lost everything I'd worked for. My house down payment, my emergency fund, everything. I know, Jake said quietly. And I'm sorry, more sorry than you can imagine. I was going to pay you back, but then I got sick, and the medical bills. He trailed off. The familiar pattern was unfolding. Jake messes up, the family circles around him, and I'm expected to understand, to forgive, to sacrifice. But something had changed in me over those 2 years. I wasn't that invisible girl anymore. I need some air, I said, pushing back from the table. On the back porch, I called my best friend Alyssa. He wants my kidney, I said, my voice shaking from both cold and shock. You have got to be kidding me, she replied. After everything he did? As we talked, I noticed Jake's rental car keys on the side table where he'd tossed them. On impulse, I grabbed them and walked to his car. The trunk popped open, revealing several designer shopping bags and a leather duffel. Guilt and curiosity battled within me as I unzipped the bag. Inside was cash, lots of it, and a folder containing documents for a recently purchased lake house in northern Minnesota, a property valued at just over $400,000. The purchase date was 3 months ago. My hands trembled as I took photos of everything with my phone. Through the dining room window, I could see my family still at the table, my empty chair a silent accusation. Mom was patting Jake's hand reassuringly. Dad was pouring more wine. They were already planning how to convince me, mapping out my sacrifice while I stood outside in the Minnesota cold, holding evidence of my brother's latest lie. I returned to the table with a decision made. I walked back into the dining room with an eerie calm, the kind that comes when you've finally reached your breaking point. Mom was serving pumpkin pie. Jake was showing Dad something on his phone, and the conversation had moved on as if my absence had been a minor interruption rather than the prelude to a storm. So, I said, sliding back into my chair, tell me more about these medical bills, Jake. He looked up, relief washing over his face at my seemingly softer tone. It's been rough. Dialysis 3 times a week, specialists, medications. Insurance only covers so much. I nodded sympathetically. Must be hard to manage that while also buying a lakefront property in Bemidji. The pie server froze in Mom's hand. Jake's face drained of color. What are you talking about? Dad asked, looking between us. I pulled out my phone and slid it across the table, displaying the photos I'd just taken. 3 months ago, Jake purchased a $400,000 lake house, cash deal. Interesting investment strategy for someone who's supposedly drowning in medical debt. You went through my things? Jake sputtered, but there was no real indignation there, only the panic of someone caught in a lie. Where did that money come from, Jake? I pressed, because I'm pretty sure I know exactly how much of it was mine. Mom reached for the phone with trembling hands. There must be some explanation. There always is with Jake, isn't there? I cut in. There's always some reason, some excuse, some story that makes it okay for him to take and take and take while the rest of us are expected to give until there's nothing left. Jake's eyes darted around the room, landing anywhere but on me. The property's an investment. I was going to sell it and pay everyone back. Everyone? Dad interrupted, his voice suddenly sharp. Who else have you borrowed from? The silence that followed was answer enough. 20,000 from Dad's retirement fund, I guessed, watching Jake's face. Another 15 from Mom's home equity line? How am I doing? Dad pushed back from the table, his face flushing. Is this true? Jake didn't answer directly. Instead, he turned to me, his expression hardening. This isn't about money. This is about family, about whether you're willing to help save your brother's life. And there it was, the ultimate manipulation, the final card he thought I couldn't refuse. Show them your medical records, I demanded. What? Your diagnosis, your treatment plan, the names of your doctors. Show us. Jake's silence stretched for one beat, then two. Oh my God, Mom whispered, realization dawning slowly. Jake, are you really sick? Of course I am, he insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. I just don't carry my medical records around with me. But you carry property deeds and cash? Dad asked, his voice dangerous now. I'd expected to feel triumph in this moment, watching Jake's carefully constructed lies collapse around him. Instead, I felt a profound sadness for my parents, whose love had been exploited, for Jake himself, trapped in patterns he seemed unable to break, and for myself, for all the years I'd measured my worth against a mirage. I don't need your kidney, Jake, I said quietly, but I do need my money back, all of it. And I think Mom and Dad deserve theirs too. Jake's face transformed then, the mask of contrition giving way to something uglier. You've always been jealous of me, he spat. Always the victim, poor little Sarah, never getting enough attention. Jake, Mom gasped, but he was unleashed now. You think you're so perfect with your nursing job and your saving habits, so righteous. But you know what? You're boring, predictable. That's why nobody ever puts you first, because you're forgettable. The words were designed to wound, to hit every insecurity I'd ever had. A year ago, they might have devastated me, but something had shifted inside me during those 2 years of rebuilding my life. His words no longer had power. I'm leaving, I announced, standing up, and I'm taking these photos to the police. What you did wasn't just a family matter, it was fraud, maybe theft. That's for the authorities to decide now. You wouldn't, Jake challenged, but uncertainty flickered in his eyes. I already filed a police report 2 years ago, I reminded him. This is just updating it with new evidence. I turned to my parents. I love you both, but I can't do this anymore. I won't be the safety net for his mistakes or the solution to his problems, and neither should you. As I walked toward the door, Mom rushed after me. Sarah, please, he's still your brother. I paused, my hand on the doorknob. No, Mom. A brother wouldn't have taken everything I worked for. A brother wouldn't lie about needing an organ. Family isn't just blood, it's trust, and there's none left here. I walked out into the crisp Minnesota evening, leaving behind the remnants of Thanksgiving dinner and years of familiar patterns. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one who disappeared from the family narrative. I was the one who changed it. The weeks following Thanksgiving unfolded like scenes from a movie I never thought I'd star in. Detective Ramirez from the Minneapolis Police Department called 2 days after I submitted the new evidence. "We're treating this as a case of fraud now," she explained. "Multiple victims, premeditated deception, substantial amounts." The relief of being believed, truly believed by someone in authority was overwhelming. Jake was arrested at the Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport, attempting to board a flight to Cancun. The lake house property was frozen, along with 3 other accounts I hadn't known about. One, surprisingly, held almost $22,000 in my name. A guilt payment, perhaps, or money he'd set aside before his newest scheme fell apart. Mom called me daily at first, her voice alternating between tearful pleas for family reconciliation and stunned disbelief as more of Jake's deceptions came to light. "He told your father he needed money for cancer treatments last year," she revealed during one conversation. "We had no idea you'd been robbed too. He made us promise not to mention it to you because he said you were struggling with your own medical bills." "I've never had medical problems, Mom," I said gently. "My health insurance through the hospital is excellent." The silence that followed spoke volumes. For the first time, she was seeing the elaborate web of lies that had entangled all of us. Dad took a different approach, showing up at my apartment one evening with a check. "It's not everything," he said gruffly, "but it's what I can manage right now." The amount was $15,000, a significant portion of what I'd lost. "Dad, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," he interrupted. "I've been thinking about a lot of things. How we always made excuses for Jake. How we never gave you the same latitude." He struggled with the words, this stoic Midwestern man who'd rarely expressed emotions beyond pride or disappointment. "I watched you work those double shifts all through college, watched you save every penny. I should have seen what was happening." That night marked the beginning of a different relationship with my father. We started meeting for coffee every Sunday, awkwardly at first, then with growing ease. He told me stories about his own childhood, about his dreams before construction took over his life. I shared my frustrations and hopes at the hospital. We were building something new on the ruins of old expectations. Mom took longer. The preliminary hearing was the turning point. Sitting in that courtroom, hearing the prosecutor detail Jake's systematic exploitation of family members, friends, and even former colleagues, the lake house was just the tip of the iceberg. There had been gambling debts, luxury purchases, and a pattern of living far beyond his means for years. "He needs help," Mom whispered to me during a recess. "Real help." "Yes," I agreed, "but we need boundaries." In March, I received an unexpected visitor at the hospital. Elise, Jake's ex-girlfriend, the one who'd allegedly left him when he lost his job. She'd seen the news about his arrest. "I always wondered if I was crazy," she said as we shared coffee in the cafeteria. "He had this way of making everything my fault, you know? The money problems, the secrets, the lies I caught him in. Somehow, I always ended up apologizing." "I know exactly what you mean," I replied, feeling an immediate kinship with this woman I'd previously envied. Elise became a surprising ally. She'd rebuilt her life after Jake, just as I was doing. "The hardest part," she confided, "was trusting myself again, trusting my instincts when they said something was wrong." She was right. I'd ignored my instincts that Thanksgiving night 2 years ago, choosing to believe Jake despite the warning screaming in my head. Never again. Jake eventually accepted a plea deal, 3 years with possibility of parole after 18 months, plus restitution to all his victims. The lakefront property was sold, the proceeds divided proportionally among those he'd defrauded. My share came to $41,253. Not everything, but enough to restart my house fund. The most surprising twist came 6 months after Jake's sentencing. I received a letter from the correctional facility where he was serving his time. "I don't expect forgiveness," he wrote in handwriting I barely recognized as his. I don't deserve it. But I am getting help here. Real help. The psychiatrist says I have narcissistic personality disorder with pathological lying. It doesn't excuse what I did to you. Nothing could. But I'm trying to understand why I became this person who could hurt the people who loved him most. I read the letter 5 times, trying to decide if this was another manipulation or the beginning of genuine change. In the end, I chose not to respond immediately. Some bridges can't be rebuilt quickly, if at all. Instead, I focused on my own healing. I joined a support group for victims of financial abuse, where I met Damon, an accountant whose brother had stolen his identity and ruined his credit. We started as friends, bonding over shared experiences, then cautiously moved toward something more. He understood my trust issues in a way no one else could. With Damon's help, I created stricter financial safeguards and eventually qualified for a mortgage. Last month, I closed on a small craftsman bungalow in the Longfellow neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but with good bones and a yard big enough for the garden I'd always wanted. Mom helped me paint the living room a warm sage green. Dad fixed the squeaky porch steps. It felt like healing in physical form. The $67,000 that Jake took represented more than money. It was my independence, my security, my proof that I could stand on my own. Losing it forced me to discover that my worth wasn't in a bank balance or in comparison to my brother. It was in my resilience, my capacity to rebuild, and my willingness to establish healthier boundaries. As for Jake's kidney, his actual health remains a mystery. The medical examinations following his arrest showed no sign of renal disease or dialysis treatments. The port on his arm had been a theatrical prop purchased online. But in an ironic twist, the prison doctor did diagnose him with hypertension and prediabetes, conditions that, if left untreated, could eventually lead to kidney problems. Sometimes the universe has a strange sense of justice. It's been 2 years and 3 months since that Thanksgiving confrontation. My bungalow now has a thriving garden, a refinished hardwood floor, and pictures on the walls that tell the story of a life reclaimed. I've been promoted to charge nurse. Damon and I are talking about marriage. Not everything is perfect, but it's authentically mine. I got another letter from Jake last week. He's up for parole next month. He's completed anger management, financial responsibility courses, and therapy. He wants to meet neutral territory, just to talk. I haven't decided yet. Forgiveness isn't a single moment, it's a process that happens in its own time. What I do know is that I'm no longer defined by being Jake's sister or by what he took from me. The money he stole forced me to rebuild my savings from scratch, but it gave me something priceless in return, the knowledge that I am stronger than any setback, wiser about who deserves my trust, and capable of setting boundaries that protect my peace. Sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as losses. If you're watching this because someone has taken something from you, your money, your trust, your sense of security, know that their actions define them, not you. The journey back to yourself might be longer than you expected, but I promise it leads somewhere worth going. Hit subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share it with someone who might need to hear that their worth isn't determined by how others have treated them. Sometimes the family we choose becomes more important than the family we're born into. And sometimes the person who needs your care most is looking back at you in the mirror. This is Sarah, signing off from Minneapolis, a little wiser, a lot stronger, and finally at home in my own life.